You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
Los Angeles, what is going on? Happy beginning of your week. This is the LA Football Show here on the LA Football Network, the Los Angeles Football Network, LAFBnetwork.com, your destination for Los Angeles football. This is your Chargers edition. I have a feeling it's going to be a wild episode after another tough loss to the Raiders. And the Rams actually play the Raiders here in just a couple days, so we get to kind of preview them on the next Rams edition of this. But for now, we're talking Bolts, Herbert, we're talking Staley, we're talking Lombardi, all that good stuff. We're getting into it. A lot of opinions here, a lot of stuff going on Twitter. We're going to get into all of it. I'm your co-host, Ryan Dowd, joined as always by the great Jamal Madney, the Madman. We just got back from Vegas, Jamal. We were there for the SC game. Obviously, that was a bummer. The next morning, USA, 3-1. That was a bummer. And then on Sunday, as we were still there, Chargers lose to the Raiders. That was a bummer. So, fun time in Vegas. Rough sports weekend in Vegas. But other than that, Jamal, how we doing? How we feeling?
Doing well, Rye. Obviously, it's such a pleasure getting to spend time with you and some of our other buddies in Vegas. It was what a terrific atmosphere in Allegiant Stadium. Unfortunately, we came out on the wrong end of the stick. 0 for 3 this weekend, 0 for 4 when you count Team USA. I'm reminded of the famous scene at the beginning in Hangover when Bradley Cooper is talking to, his buddy's wife and saying, Tracy, we effed up. That's probably not going to happen, us making this wedding. And that's kind of how I feel about this weekend. Our team's kind of effed up, so I'm excited about getting into it with you.
Yeah, well, I think I said it. We were at a nice Chinese restaurant off the strip on Sunday, and I was like, we should get the F out of here. Like, let's just – I think that's what everyone feels on Vegas regardless. So it's like, it's a great time when you're there, but when it's over, it's like, let's go home. And of course, you're driving. It's just that horrible looking to that 4 to 5 to 6, depending on traffic hour drive, getting back to LA. But we did it. We braved it for you. Fans, we did it for you. We sacrificed our bodies over here, the sacrificial lambs at the LA Football Network, to bring you all the up-to-date current information. And we're able to do it. Show is always brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today, because if you can't go to Vegas, you got to go to betonline.ag. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. You get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That is free money. Honestly, Jamal, we're going to get into it, but I'm putting a fairly, not hefty, because I don't have a lot of confidence in it, but I'm going to put a decent amount of money on the Chargers right now for their Super Bowl bet, because they keep kind of dropping down the rankings. They're still actually remarkably high, considering they're 6-6 right now. But I think that shows Vegas's faith in them getting healthy at the right time. But it's a good bet. I mean, 50 on it. If you lose 50, whatever. Who knows if they go on a run here, which we'll get into if that's even possible. But betonline.ag, promo code BELIEVE. Tell them the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. So, Jamal, we watched this game. In Vegas. We were at Allegiant throughout the weekend. We're going to dive kind of deep into it, but as we do kind of every recap show here, I always start with you with this very generic question and just your overall takeaways from this 27-20 loss at the hands of Josh McDaniels and Derek Carr.
Yeah, Ryan, it's a bit of a head scratcher. I'll be honest with you. The game started off so promisingly where the Chargers get that pick six from Callahan, take a 10-0 lead. Carr looks as erratic as ever, throwing the ball all over the yard. I actually found myself going back to the clip where I called him a Chevy Volt at the beginning of the season, patting myself on the back and said, hey, that's a great take. It's aged well, and this should be a comfortable victory for the Chargers along the road to going to 7-5, getting 2 in a row, and really building that requisite momentum that we were talking about for them to situate themselves as a real threat in the AFC playoffs. And then a funny thing happened in the second and third quarters where the Raiders outscored the Chargers 27-3 and just completely dominated the game. The Chargers, again, could not run the football, 22 carries for 72 yards. And you so astutely pointed out to me before we got on air the true Dairud metric is 17 carries only because we're not counting Justin Herbert's scrambles as designed run plays, and rightfully so. But Ekeler only 10 carries, 35 yards. Joshua Kelley, 7 carries, 30 yards. Again, not getting enough balance, not getting enough with that run game, becoming predictable yet again with the short passing game, short to intermediate passing game. And midway through the fourth quarter, this team was down 27-13 and just getting run out of the gym. And then obviously there was that incredible throw, Herbert to Keenan Allen on that 4th and 12 that pulled it within 27-20. Chargers get a stop and then try and tie the game. Some tough calls there. Looked like a PI on Keenan Allen, but this game was lost well before that. And it's just another head scratcher here with the Chargers. Herbert wows you with the throws that he can make. And when you look at him making that throw on 4th and 12, you really wonder, why aren't we seeing more of this downfield action when a guy like that has so much arm talent? And why is this offense continuing to struggle possession over possession? They have been consistently inconsistent all year, and it's fitting that they're 6-6 because they just can't seem to get any rhythm one way or the other. So very disappointing loss, Ryan, for me. Now they sit at 6-6, and for me, they've got to go now 4-1 to make a credible run at the playoffs. So they've eaten away at just about all of their margin. And now with teams like the Dolphins and the Titans and having to go to the Broncos, not a very easy schedule here. They've got to get this thing right, and they've got to get this thing right now.
Yeah, very disappointing loss. I think a lot of people felt this was a must-win type of game, and I wouldn't say it was must-win in terms of playoff elimination by the numbers, but it certainly makes it an uphill battle. Like you mentioned, I think 4-1 is definitely fair of how they have to go, but also drops into 2-3 in the division now, having only one game left against a division opponent in the Broncos, dropping 2 to the Chiefs and now going 1-1 against a Raiders team that, all we talk about injuries on the Chargers, they're definitely more injured than the Raiders. I don't want anyone to hear me wrong, but Raiders are without Hunter Renfrow. They're without Darren Waller. They've had injuries on the offensive line. They have some defensive injuries. And so it's a team that I think the Chargers are still better than going into this game, even with some of those injuries. Now, again, they lost some guys during the game. Yet again, Sebastian Joseph-Jay goes down. He's that dreaded week-to-week call or day-to-day call, which probably means 2 to 3 games in what we've seen this season. So, it is what it is at this point. It's unfortunate. But I think what we thought all along, Jamal, was if that running game really got going, it was going to be tough for the Chargers to play along. I thought going into this game, Derek Carr wouldn't throw the ball more than 25 times. He did have 30, but only 16 of those completions. So it definitely wasn't Carr in the passing game that hurt them. It was those, 26 carries for 144 yards from Josh Jacobs and the touchdown. And, we knew it was going to be tough. I mean, you don't just change your run defense during the season. Like this hasn't been great ever since Joey Bosa went down. It's been a much lesser run defense. They've obviously had other injuries. I mean, they've just been, if you want to look at the receiver position, Jamal, the most position decimated is that interior defensive line by far. But at some point you have to we talk about it. Like the scheme is, I'm going to say this, and this is probably going to be controversial because I know a lot of people are really hard on Staley right now. And he's head coach. Please be hard. However people want a fan, be a fan. Like I hate I'm not trying to control how fans react. I'm going to give my opinion on it. I'm going to tell you, I think maybe you're wrong. That doesn't mean you can't be upset and be angry. By all means, throw everything on the TV, anything out of, violence or hate or anything like that. Like, fan how you want. But I think the scheme is okay. The scheme is sound because you see players in the right positions. They're just not making the tackles. They're not executing, not making the plays. Part of that is because of injuries. They're just not, the talent level is a big drop off. And part of that is, like we talked about now 2-3 weeks going on, Jamal, it's up to the players now to hold themselves accountable. You need those leaders on defense to really be vocal and boisterous and say, hey, like, we're put in this spot to make these tackles. Like, there's many times when they're catching Jacobs at the line, behind the line, 1 or 2 yards, and he still gets 5 or 6 yards. That's not a scheme issue. That's a either player talent issue or just an execution issue. So that was the issue I had with the defense. We'll get to Herbert in the offense once I toss it back to you. But that was the big thing I noticed with the defense is they were in the right spot a lot of times. Yes, there were some broken plays. Yes, there was that touchdown of Devontae Adams, I know, and other things that happened. But I think overall they played a schematically sound game, just not a very great execution game. And obviously, this team is a bottom 2 team in defensive yards, but also not very great in scoring, giving up, I think it's an average of 27 points a game, which is what they gave up against the Raiders. And, even if you have a great offense, you don't want to be giving up 27 points a game, which is not going to give you a great spot to win. And obviously, this is not a great offense right now, which is what we'll get to here in a bit. But those were my kind of takeaways, at least from the defense.
Yeah, Ryan, I completely agree. And we've been saying this now for a couple of weeks where they've been in the right positions. And at some point, the dog has to come out of you and you've got to go out there and make a play. And there was tentativeness. There was sloppiness. There was a lack of form. There were all of these things that just allowed the Raiders to play the game on their terms, allow Josh Jacobs to have 26 carries, just an exorbitant number in the modern NFL, and allow the Raiders to play at the tempo that they wanted to do so. But Ryan, it's hard for me to have a deeper conversation about the defense. I get it. SJD now, it looks like it'll probably be a couple of weeks. They've been decimated on the defensive line. Obviously, the issue with J.C. Jackson, and just it's been one injury after the next. But at the end of the day, yet again, they had the ball with the chance to tie it in the fourth quarter. Your defense has to be doing something right in order to be able to do that. When you look at yourself offensively and say, we didn't score an offensive touchdown until midway through the fourth quarter. We had 3 points on offense through 3.5 quarters. And so I don't care how bad you're playing defensively. The fact that you could say that sentence and then also say that you had the ball with a chance to tie it at the end says that, hey, your defense gave up some yards, but they tightened when they had to. They struggled, of course, but they did enough to give you an opportunity to at least tie the game and get into overtime. So we can bash on the defense all we want, but if you've got a top 4 guy and if you've got what you believe as the franchise quarterback for the next 10 or 15 years, that defensive performance was probably decent enough to steal a game on the road, either at the end of regulation or in overtime.
Well, and they had a pick 6. I mean, they scored 7 of the 20 points. I mean, the offense only scored 13 points against not a great Raiders defense. So that on top of it is, yes, they gave up 27 points. Yes, that's not good enough. That's not championship level defense. Yes, I get Staley is considered a defensive guru when he's hired, and everyone expected this to be, he comes from running the number 1 overall defense with the Rams as a coordinator, comes from the Vic Fangio system. Yeah, we are not saying by any means this defense is good enough or there shouldn't be blame put around. But if we are considering Herbert to be who we all think he is, that's what we're really going to get into now with the breadth of this podcast. But if we are to believe he's top 5, top 3, whatever, you should be fine then with the weapons they have. Yes, the injuries. Yes, there's all these different things that have gone into it. But that should be enough. Again, not maybe to win a Super Bowl, but to beat a 4-1 Raiders team, yes, that should be enough when you have Justin Herbert with the ball, down 7, with plenty of time. And unfortunately, they just didn't get it done.
Yeah, Ryan, I think this sort of opens it up for a larger conversation here is at some point we're going to have to take the diapers off of Justin Herbert and he's going to have to put his big boy pants on. And it's, as a fan base, as a coaching staff, as an organization, okay, there are areas where he's at about 45 career starts, right? He's got enough experience. The arm talent is unparalleled. We're just floored by his athleticism, his frame, his ability. But now this is time and again where he's had the ball with an opportunity to tie the game, win the game at the end, and he's come empty. And there's just not that same level of fear that you have with him yet that you do with the other greats. I mean, we had a very spirited conversation in the LAFB Slack, Ryan, last night. I mean, you look at Brady down 16-3 with 5.5 minutes to go, and he ends up winning the game. And at 16-10 with the ball, they kept showing Andy Dalton, and he kept pacing. Andy Dalton knew it was over. He was pacing. The look of resignment, the look of defeat on Andy Dalton's face, the look of fear the fear, the look of finality, it was all on his face. He knew it. It's like, this is over. This is just a matter of, semantics and cosmetics. But Brady's going to take the ball down the field, score the touchdown, win the game. When Mahomes has the ball at the end, there's a resignment. There's a fear. It's going to happen. Like, let's just put me out of my misery. I'd rather die quickly than die a slow, painful death. When Rodgers has the ball, it's the same thing. I mean, when these guys have the ball, it's over. And I think at some point, we have to sort of acknowledge here with Justin Herbert, the accuracy is still questionable. The reads on progressions are still questionable. The leadership is still questionable. And so at some point, whether it's end of this year, in the offseason, next year, we have to stop, powdering his butt and you're giving him the nice diapers and caressing him and sort of putting him with his bib and having his nice baby food because, God forbid we criticize Herbert. At some point, he's going to have to be potty trained. And at some point, he's going to have to put his big boy pants on because we can't keep calling him a top 4, top 5 quarterback and him not delivering at the end of these games. And I agree with you. The defense is not good enough to be a championship team, but they were good enough on Sunday to win the game if you have a top 4 quarterback.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it comes down to. And you look at against the Niners, they were good enough. They had an opportunity there, and granted, okay, let me start with this and I'm going to start with this. We're going to make a soundbite out of this, or someone will, I'm sure. I'm going to make sure this gets in there so I don't get skinned alive on Twitter because I know, you talk about Justin Herbert, it's all bad. Justin Herbert is a phenomenal quarterback. He's a phenomenal human. He is a leader in some respect. We're saying he's not quite to that vocal leadership where I think his teammates love him. He's obviously beloved by the city of LA, the fan base of the Chargers. He's obviously a man of integrity, so he leads in that regard, but he's not that guy yet. There's a minute 20 left where his teammates even probably are saying, we won. They just haven't done it enough yet. They've done it a few times, but top 3 talent, don't know if he's in that top 3 yet. And here's kind of why, and this is what you said, Jamal, and then I'm going to kind of break it down a little bit. Hopefully I'll be able to eloquently enough to make sense, because by no means are we bashing Herbert. By no means are we going Emmanuel Acho on here and comparing him to Tua Tagovailoa or saying this. But if we're going to talk about Herbert in the same breath as Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, even Joe Burrow at this point, because he's been in the Super Bowl already, if we're going to talk in the same breath, then we can't make every excuse in the book for him. Like, there has to be that moments when you say, okay, he's elevated his team to that level. And yes, I get the play calling hasn't been great. I get Joe Lombardi might at this point. I still am not as far as some people, but I'm starting to get more where, maybe he is not the best play caller. And we've seen some things where it's gotten a little stale and whatnot. But you look at, and here's a couple comparisons I'll make, and then I'll get back to Burrow, Jamal. And jump in whenever you want, because I don't want to get too long here, because I'll probably just keep talking. Here's a few comparisons, though. So you look at Brady. Bucks offense has not been good this year by any means. So I don't want that to get twisted. But Brady's, like he did last night, like he did against the Rams, when it came down crunch time, minute left in the game, 45 seconds left in the game, like he's in his whole career, you knew it's probably over. Byron Leftwich last year, the OC under Bruce Arians, was considered a very hot head coaching candidate because of his offensive guru-ness, prowess. He's not even uttered in that breath anymore. Didn't get a head coaching gig last year. I'm not saying he never will, but now with Bruce Arians gone, he's still the OC. The offense is struggling a bit. He's not in those conversations for this next head coaching cycle. He's fallen off. So when everyone wants to say just the head coach, just the coaching play calling, holding Herbert back. Yes, there could be some instances of that, but you see a lot of the greats rise above it. Here's another example. Chargers fans are going to hate that I bring this up, but if you're an older Charger fans, you will know and you can admit it. Great John Elway. For some abysmal teams. And Reeves. Any coach held a quarterback back, Dan Reeves drafted a quarterback in the first round during Elway's prime. Like, what are you doing during Elway's prime? 3 Super Bowls with those teams. Got blown out of them, but took those teams to 3 Super Bowls, rose above, and did that. We talk about all these different injuries and offensive line deficiencies and different receivers and that. Those are all valid. 100%. At some point, we're not saying Justin Herbert's not a top 7 quarterback, even with all this, everything we're saying. But if we're going to say top 3, top 2 in the argument for best, we can't keep making all these different excuses to be the best. Sure, we can say all these things and say Herbert's still top 7, has phenomenal arm talent. He's getting held back, but then that's what he is. Then he's not better than Brady. Then he's not better than Allen. Then he's not better than Joe Burrow. And I get a lot of those guys haven't necessarily had to deal with some of the things that he have, but we have to see someone rise above because, Jamal, I think the biggest thing that everyone puts blinders on is they forget those quarterbacks that have elevated others and just assume their situation is always great, especially when it's not their team because they're not paying attention. And here's another really, really easy example. And we talk about the offensive line right now and how I've seen a lot of people saying, like, well, he's not getting the time at the end of the game to do it. And this is just one example. Like, I can pull up a bunch of, but I don't know if you remember back in Brady's heyday in the New England days, but Nate Solder was his left tackle. Heralded as a great left tackle. Signing with the Giants was horrible. Didn't last his contract with the Giants. So I say that because a lot of times quarterbacks also elevate their offensive line. If they're very quick, if they're making decisions at the line of scrimmage, if they're going through progressions quick. And that's where I don't think we've quite seen it from Herbert yet, where he's making those on reads at the line of scrimmage pre-snap. I don't think he's as strong pre-snap as some of these great quarterbacks yet. He's got all the talent, all the arm, all the athletic ability, but I don't think we're seeing it pre-snap. Brady is by no means the most athletic quarterback, not even top 20 athletic quarterback. But what makes Brady so great is his pre-snap reads and determining ahead of time where the ball's going. If Herbert was able to do that at a higher level, not saying he can't do it, at a higher level, well, maybe a lot of these balls would be out quicker and he wouldn't need 4.5 seconds like a lot of fans are saying. So these are these little tiny things where, yes, there's excuses to be made, of course. But if we're going to always make excuses, then he's never going to be the best. Because if you're getting held back by excuses, like with anything in life, you have to rise above those excuses. The great ones do. I think Herbert has that ability to be the great one. He's just not there yet. Still probably top 7, top 8. Put some of these games together, then so be it. And the last thing, Jamal, because I know I'm already getting very long-winded here on this monologue, and I saw people bring this up. It's a valid point, but here's why I think it's a hollow point. Brought up that he has 10 fourth quarter comebacks since coming to the league, which is the most since coming to the league. Great. Fantastic. Where that stat is a little hollow, people like to use it to prop things up. And again, it's not wrong. It can be misleading because it doesn't take into account when in the fourth quarter those comebacks happen. Do you know who's leading the league this year, Jamal, in fourth quarter comeback wins?
Kirk Cousins with 6. Do you know who led the league last year? Fourth quarter comebacks? Mac Jones.
With his cane and wheelchair, Ben Roethlisberger. And the year before that, Tannehill. Now, I don't think anyone, right mind, just saying those 3 quarterbacks are the best 3 quarterbacks in football. So yes, Herbert has 10 fourth quarter comeback wins. Fantastic. But what we want to see, and all we're trying to say here, because he's great, we love him, he's built for this team, built for this league, built for this city. But when it comes down to crunch time in those final 2 minutes, can he overcome, whether it's his own injuries, coaching, to put the team on his back and win? Because the great ones, that's what they are able to do. And for Justin Herbert to be a great one, that's what we want to see. So let me take a breath and you can jump in.
No, Ryan, I mean, you said it perfectly and you said it completely and you said it pretty effortlessly. And I think the only thing I want to reiterate here is we absolutely believe Herbert is a no-brainer top 10 quarterback. I think we absolutely believe he's a no-brainer top 7 quarterback. But I think to your point, if we're going to talk him in that rarefied air of top 4, top 3, and ultimately challenge Mahomes and Allen to be the face of this league for the next 10 years, he's going to have to start getting held to a higher standard. And I want to add a couple elements there. One is obviously so many concerns, rightfully so, about the offensive line, and he has no offensive line to deal with, and this is sort of completely limiting his ability to win football games. Well, last year, we saw a young guy by the name of Joe Burrow take his team to the Super Bowl and was essentially one play away from winning the Super Bowl with arguably the worst offensive line in football and inarguably one of the 5 worst offensive lines in football. And so he was able to do it. Similar age, not as good an arm, probably better pre-snap, probably better leader, probably better in terms of accuracy, but a very comparable quarterback in terms of who Herbert is going to be rivaled with for the next decade. And then we talk about, obviously, Keenan Allen and his shredded hamstring and wide receiver number 1 being out for a significant portion of this season. And only now is this rhythm starting to work. And then when he comes back, Mike Williams is out and so on and so forth. And this, musical chairs at wide receiver is also very detrimental. Well, let's look in Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes lost Tyreek Hill, who I would argue was the most valuable non-quarterback to his team in the NFL. I think Tyreek Hill for that offense was the most valuable non-quarterback piece across the league in terms of what he meant for that Andy Reid scheme. And Mahomes lost his wide receiver number 1, and Mahomes is the betting favorite to be league MVP this year, and the Chiefs in all likelihood will be the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs. So it's possible. You can overcome this, and we don't have to go all the way back to John Elway, even though that was a very credible argument and completely agree, and Elway's a legend, one of the 5 greatest quarterbacks ever, but we can go back to just this year and just last year and look at guys, similar ages, similar skill sets in similar situations, and they were able to elevate their teams in a way, quite frankly, Justin Herbert has not been able to. And until we see that, until we see Justin Herbert overcoming some of the challenges with the offensive line, overcoming some of the challenges in the running game, overcoming some of the challenges with the defense, yes, he's top 10, yes, he's top 7, but there's a gap between him today and what Mahomes and Allen and Brady and Burrow and Rodgers are. And that's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and then kind of the last point I'll say on that, and I agree with everything you said, is, when you look at just the Chargers specifically, and like with anything in life, we talk about this all the time, Jamal, on camera, off camera, there's always, usually the middle is the right. Like the middle is the correct vantage point. And so when you look at Herbert and you look at, we'll just go with Joe Lombardi, we'll leave Staley out of it because obviously he's the head coach, but he's not like running the offense. You have the majority, and again, I'm not criticize fans, it's just because that's what people are talking to me and I'm seeing everywhere and hearing. So everyone, absolutely credible to your own opinion, fan how you want, but the majority, I would say the vast, probably the 98% of the majority is all the blame is on Lombardi holding Herbert back, this, and that. And you talk about Herbert or say anything bad about Herbert, it's like, look at the injuries. He's getting held back by his coaching staff. He can't do this. He's actually elevating the coaching staff because they're doing this. When in reality, if you can make the excuse, you got to sit back a little bit. Like, I know fan stands for fanatics. Sit back and kind of like really assess the situation. And again, I want to say clearly, I'm not saying Joe Lombardi is a phenomenal offensive coordinator and play caller. So let's not get that twisted. But if you're going to make all the injury excuses and all these timing and all this stuff for Herbert, you have to also allow that to be an excuse for the play calling, because you can't call your offense exactly how you want it if A, you don't have the horses out there to do it, or B, obviously the coaching staff is not going to come say this, and I'm not saying they believe this, but or B, you don't believe Herbert can truly do all those things without having the supreme talent around him. I'm not saying that's the case, but that could be something that no one's really thought about. Maybe it's, why are we airing it out? Why aren't we doing it? Well, we don't trust that Herbert is going to even trust his guys to do that if it's not Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Jalen Guyton. Like, he may not trust those guys to do it. Again, don't know for sure, but those are things to actually think about and really assess. And kind of the last point I'll make, I know I said that was the last point, but this is the last point I'll make because it's specific to the Raiders who they just played, is, now, Jamal, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just because we're talking right now about this situation, but I don't really think anyone out there truly thinks Josh McDaniels is like an offensive guru, right? I mean, I think it's safe to say he rode the coattails of Tom Brady. I mean, he went to Denver as a head coach, completely flamed out, not only destroyed the organization in terms of trades, in terms of Spygate and all that stuff, but also just ran an archaic offense that didn't work. Then he was fired. He went to St. Louis, the Rams. It was a one-year offensive coordinator. They were abysmal on offense. He goes back to the Patriots, and all of a sudden he's this offensive guru again because he has Tom Brady. Well, guess what? Now he's in the Raiders. He has Derek Carr, who we all know Justin Herbert's 1,000 times better than Derek Carr. They lose Waller. They lose Hunter Renfrow. They have the 8th ranked total offense. Chargers are 13. So if everyone wants to blame play calling, I don't think Josh McDaniels is necessarily a phenomenal play caller over Joe Lombardi. For sure don't think Derek Carr is a better quarterback than Justin Herbert. But they are a better offense, a better NFL offense than this Chargers offense. So, yes, there's plenty of rain to go around, both sides, coaching and all that. But at some point, we have to, and it's holding accountable doesn't mean like hammering the guy because we all love him. But at some point, we have to acknowledge that Justin Herbert, the face of this franchise, the future, who is undoubtedly the future, can play better. That is all we're saying.
Yeah, Ryan, I think that's so well said. And one other thing I want to add here is you talked about truth lying in the middle ground, and that's obviously the case. There's a principle in logic known as Occam's razor, where Occam's razor says the simplest solution tends to be the correct one. And I think of Justin Herbert and his evolution, not only with the Chargers, but also in college. Coming out, and after we saw the first 30 starts of Justin Herbert's career, so much of the conversation was, wow, Oregon and Mario Cristobal really held this guy back. I mean, with a guy of this talent, how come Oregon wasn't more of a national title contender? Why weren't they more of a credible threat in the college football playoff? Granted, they won the Rose Bowl, but they were a 3-loss team and firmly in the top 15. And a lot of Oregon's offense, Justin Herbert's final year there, looks a lot like the Chargers' offense this year in terms of a lot of checkdowns, a lot of horizontal stuff, and not really giving him the ability to vertically air it out or go through progressions. And the initial thinking there was Mario Cristobal and his staff just didn't know how to manage this prolific talent. But now, as we're starting to sort of accumulate some data here over the course of 45 starts in the NFL, over the course of 20 plus starts in college, I think what we're realizing is he still has a way to go in terms of processing information. That he may be very talented, and he undoubtedly is. And like you said, we love him, and he's the face of the Chargers. He's going to be a possible face of the NFL for the next decade. But you can't deny the fact that now Oregon seemed to have the same challenges that the Chargers do now. And Occam's razor would suggest not that everyone around him is screwed up for all of these different reasons, but the problem really is him right now and just his inability to have made that final step in terms of being able to read defenses, like you said, pre-snap, go through progressions more seamlessly during the snap, and be able to be accurate with the football. Occam's razor would suggest an incredible talent, unbelievable arm, but still one more step in terms of the cerebral aspects of the game.
Yeah, do you remember, and we'll wrap up with this, but do you remember, Jamal, this is for different reasons because he had an attitude issue. Do you remember a quarterback by the name of Jeff George?
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeff George, maybe one of the most talented, strongest arm quarterbacks that probably no one remembers. Now, his was for different reasons because he was a hothead, angry. He just could not control his emotions, kind of a journeyman. But when he just sat back there and could sling it, he was so talented and had that ability, but he couldn't get out of his own head to make it to the next step. Now, Herbert, for very different reasons. Obviously, he's cool, calm, and collected. He's very polite, humble. I don't think he would chew out someone trying to take his lunch money or whatever. Like, the dude is the nicest, humblest guy. But for different reasons, we just haven't quite seen it. Again, it's year 3. So we're not saying he can't do it, but he just hasn't quite had that killer instinct yet in him that makes the great ones the great ones. And 100% still believe he can, but we've seen enough now from his 4 years at Oregon, from his time now 3 years, 2.5 years at the Chargers, multiple different coaches and this and that, where it's like, okay, well, maybe it is him that needs to elevate a little bit more. And, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of hate for this, Jamal, and that's fine, because I'm happy the Chargers fan base loves their quarterback. I absolutely love it, because he is a great quarterback, and the Chargers hit a home run in drafting him. But I just think it's a real conversation that people need to think about it. And we'll kind of, when you really look at the history of quarterback for the Chargers in general, and you look at Phillip Rivers, we started covering this team back when Phillip Rivers was still the quarterback. And Phillip Rivers, a very good quarterback, obviously beloved by the city of San Diego, the Chargers organization. But every time something bad happened, it was every excuse in the book but Phillip Rivers. And I brought this up, Jamal, when we were kind of talking about this conversation before we started. And I remember covering the Chargers-Chiefs Mexico City game down in Azteca. And they lost by, it was either 3 points, but it was one possession. And they had the ball at the final drive. And they lost the game. If I'm not mistaken, it was an end zone throw for a potential chance to win, interception, which was Phillip Rivers' 4th interception of the game. And most I heard talk about it was blaming the coaching staff. The defense was unprepared, yada, yada, this. You're not going to win any football games if your quarterback throws 4 interceptions. So that's obviously way different, but there's been a growth here among Chargers fans of the quarterback can kind of do no wrong, and it's everyone else's fault around. And I get all the bad things that's happened in this organization. I get the history. I understand all that. I believe a lot of it. I empathize with a lot of it. But at some point, it has to rise above and elevate. And we've seen other quarterbacks do it. I think Justin Herbert can. Just hasn't quite done it yet. Hopefully he does soon, though, Jamal. And hopefully he make the playoffs this year.
Absolutely, Ryan. And we're rooting for him. And he's such a great kid and a prodigious talent. And I think the point we're just trying to make is that sometimes just having a great arm and being physically so gifted isn't enough. And that's why the greats have that cerebral part of the game, the leadership gene, all of those things with physical aspects. I love how you mentioned Jeff George. How can you ask me if I don't know who Jeff George is? Jeff George with those June Jones Falcons team, the run and shoot. He got Andre Rison. Dion was there on the other side for a little bit. Those were some fun teams. And yeah, he could absolutely sling it. And he was just sort of a hothead. I mean, we look at guys like Todd Marinovich, Robo QB, if you recall, with the Raiders. He flamed out, even though he had a cannon. You look at Ryan Leaf. You look at Drew Bledsoe. You look at Jamarcus Russell. These guys all had just rockets for arms, but it didn't necessarily mean that it was going to translate into NFL superstardom. Now, Herbert's better than all of those guys already by a mile, and he already has a greater resume than all of those guys basically combined. So in no way, shape, or form are we comparing him to those guys. But the point we're just trying to make is just the physical tools and the ability to throw great balls on a laser. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And you have to sort of complement the physical tools with those cerebral tools and with those leadership tools. And I think it's in those latter 2 dimensions that Herbert still needs to take that one final step. I have no doubts that he's going to get there. He's going to make that step, and he's going to be a superstar. The fun, the mystery, the excitement, the surprise, the adventure is if he can make those steps this year and get the Chargers into the playoffs, or he makes those steps next year, or he makes those steps at some point after that. But he is going to make those steps, and we can't wait to cover him when he does.
And here's the last comp I'll say, Jamal. I'll let you respond, because let me know if I'm way off. But if we want to make a true, not necessarily based on skill set or intangibles or anything like that, but just of where these quarterbacks are at this point in their career, based on kind of killer instinct, based on the way they kind of go about the game a little bit. And we talk about the same draft class. I'm looking at Joe Burrow, reminds me of John Elway. Justin Herbert reminds me of Dan Marino. Both phenomenal quarterbacks. Dan Marino statistically was better in every statistical category. better. I went to 5 Super Bowls, winning 2 of them. Marino went to 1, winning none of them. And so that is what Herbert right now on that Marino level, which is great, phenomenal, same type numbers. Leader, his players love him, but he doesn't quite elevate that next level. And guess what? Those Elway-led teams were worse teams than those Marino-led Dolphins teams. Joe Burrow Bengals team was probably worse. Chargers, Justin Herbert-led team. Just need to see Herbert get to that Elway type level and not the Marino. Am I way off, or does that make sense?
No, I love that comp. And I would say Burrow is definitely, in terms of that analogy, spot on. Burrow gives me a little bit of Montana vibes too, a little bit. I like to call him Baby Brady as well. But yes, you're spot on. That last step of being able to elevate the others around you. And Herbert is sort of that robo QB, just like Marino was. Marino had that lightning quick release and the great arm. Herbert just has a rocket. I mean, it's absolutely unreal. Herbert, a better athlete than Marino was in terms of scrambling.
Yeah.
Marino probably get the ball out quicker. But yes, spot on. Just physical freaks, statistical machines. And then you got Elway on the other side with Burrow, the beautiful blonde hair, the it factor, the killer instinct, the Mamba mentality, and that ability to elevate and galvanize and the charisma. And guys just want to break their noses for him. And so I think that's kind of that final step with Justin Herbert on his road to greatness. So I love the comp.
Cool. Well, let's see it happen. So everyone, let us know your thoughts, because I'm sure a lot of you are not happy right now, or maybe we're making some sense. Either way, let us know. Try to keep it somewhat clean if you can, but whatever, to each their own. Comment below wherever you're watching, if you're on YouTube or if you're on LFNetwork.com, or if you're on any of our podcast platforms, or you can text us. Text bolts to 31032. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Just give us kind of your opinion on Herbert. Tell us if we're way off, if we're spot on, if we're kind of on the right path, whatever. We want to hear it all. We appreciate all the insight. One thing I'll say, Jamal, that I've loved about Chargers fans, even if I don't agree with them, but I just love the engagement. Like, everyone is so vocal and loves to talk about their team, so passionate about the Chargers. And it's fun when I can kind of, put a tweet out. I'm like, all right, probably going to get a lot of response to this. Not many good ones, but hey, I appreciate the amount of engagement and the amount of, conversation we can have, because I want to be clear that neither me or Jamal are doing this for clicks or anything like that, or anything like, Manuel Acho is doing, where it's, social media quarterback. None of that is what we're doing. It's just kind of what we're seeing from the evaluation now, 12 games into this season. And I think it's time that we kind of start, again, not putting all the blame on Justin Herbert, but at least admitting that, he is a part of this, because it is a team game. And so everyone holds some piece of the pie, and he does have a little bit more of the pie than I think people are willing to say. So anyway, glad we were able to get into it. As always, spot on. Guy I know in the room. Appreciate you. Have a great couple days. We'll obviously be back to preview this next Chargers game. But for all out there listening, thank you so much. This is the LA Football Show. For Ryan Dyrud, that's Jamal Madney. Take care. Talk to you all soon.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.